Yeah, but it is what it is. I mean, it could have really happened at any point. Why are you looking at me like that? Whoops. Welcome back, everybody. It is another week of Parsha at the Barber. And we're not at the Barber because we're in the middle of Sphira. And we miss Ilya. I miss Ilya. I think you guys might miss Ilya. Those of you who remember the Ilya days that were so long ago. No, just kidding. Ilya, if you're watching this, we miss you. Hope we can film together again soon. A few things before we start. Number one, please like, subscribe, and share this with your friends. We are really close to having 500 subscribers at the time of the filming of this video. And I think we're 10 away. And we've had close to 100 new subscribers, I think, since the last video. So welcome, everybody. Really glad to have you here, and hope you're enjoying. Comment below at any point about anything, constructive criticism, as long as it's positive and, Yeah, let's get on with the show. This week's Parsha is Parshas, Bechukosai. And I want to start this off by just saying that all the Torah that we're learning, the merit of all the good stuff that we're doing here is dedicated to the soldiers at the front lines, the hostages that should come back, and for the whole Am Yisrael, for peace in the whole world. Mashiach now. And let's get on with it. So, Parshas Bechukosai talks about, all the good things that happen when we follow the Torah, follow the mitzvahs, and follow what Hashem says, and God forbid the opposite. If, God forbid, the words of the Torah and Hashem is not followed. And then it speaks about some other laws afterward. Now, I really like to bring stories in connection to the Parsha. Today, I want to bring a few stories. One of them that I actually heard today in a podcast called History for the Curious. You guys have to check this out. It's all about different eras in Jewish history. You must check it out. They're not sponsoring anything. I love them so much. I think that every single Jew who cares about Jewish history absolutely has to get on this podcast. It's incredible. And God willing, there'll be a link in the description. Okay, so one of the first things it says that when we follow the words of Hashem, so it says, Hashem, right? I will give you your rain in its time. And there are many stories about prayers for rain and miracles happening. Here's a story that happened in the Me'am Loizer brings it down as Rabbi Ben Chisdoi Kirashkash. Now I looked at this rabbi up, and it seems his name was Chisdoi, Rav Chisdoi Kreskas. He lived in the kingdom of Aragon. He was born in Barcelona. This happened in his time where there was a drought, there was a famine. I guess they didn't have rain for a long time. And the brilliant idea of the people in the town was to drag out all the Jews of the town, lock the gates to the city, and say, "You're not going to come back in until we have rain. Pray for rain." And this is in the kingdom of Aragon, so they turned to Rabbi Chisdoi Kreskas, and he davens. He alluded to tshuva, and what he was saying in his words, he alluded to teshuva, and it starts to rain. And they welcome the Jews back in, and they start praising them. All the non-Jewish townspeople said, there's no nation as important as the Jewish nation. And the merit of rain comes from Torah, because Torah is likened to water. And just like water, and just like Torah is like water, so therefore with the power of Torah, we have the power to bring down rain. Now, this reminded me of the story that I was talking about, that I heard in this podcast. There's a series in the Holocaust called The Silent War. It's incredible stories of heroism. The podcast discusses so many things that most of us have never heard of. people most of us have never heard of. And at one point, before he gets into the main part of the podcast, the rabbi, his name is Rabbi Aubrey Hirsch. It's possible you guys have heard of him. His podcast is definitely very well known already. And he does tours everywhere. He's a tour guide, and he knows so much history that he does trips with people. People go to different countries with him on these trips, and it reveals so much about the history there. So before he gets into the main thing, he just wants to bring in just 3 heroic stories. And one of the stories he says reminded me of this, where the Nazis would force the people at the camps. He would force the Jews to. He would shout out and say, "Who is the most important or respected?" I think it was who's the most respected race on earth, and they would all have to answer the Third Reich. And who is the most cursed, and who's the lowliest of all races? And they would say the Jews, and these are Jewish people in the camps, and they're exhausted, and obviously, if they don't do as they're told, they can be killed. And so they're saying this, and one of the people who were there was the Bechukosai Rebbe. And the Bechukosai Rebbe had a friend there who had sewed into the seam, the inside of his prison uniform. I don't even know what you call the clothing, but that they gave him over there. But he had sewn in 2,000 of the currency that was then, I forget. And he said, I took it with me. I put it there in case I would ever be able to have a chance to get out of this. And he said, so sad. He says to the Bechukosai Rebbe, I was able to purchase 2 cyanide pills, one for me and one for you. And he was saying, how can you stand there and say these words, right? They make you say these words. How is it possible? He couldn't do it anymore. And he was saying, I'm never going to say these words again. That the Third Reich is the most respected and that the Jews are the most cursed. It's the opposite. And the Bechukosai Rebbe told him, in short, thank you for your friendship. I'm a Rebbe. My father was a Rebbe. My grandfather was a Rebbe, and I'm not allowed to take a life, even if it's my own life. And you could just imagine the Bechukosai Rebbe knew this person was about to take his life. And that day they had the same routine where the officer would say, who's the most respected and who's the most cursed, and everyone would answer. And when he said, who's the most respected race on earth, a voice that was louder than all the other voices yelled out, the Jewish people, the Jews, the Jews, the Jews. And they ran over to the noise, to the person, and they saw where the noise was coming from. And when they reached this man, he was already gone with a smile plastered on his face. A permanent smile. He had taken the pill, obviously, and left on his own terms, as they say. And he died making it. Really, it was a Kiddush Hashem. And it was such a bittersweet story, but it's not really connected, except that this just reminded me of that. In that time when this Rabbi Chisdai Kreskas davened for rain, it brought great honor to the Yidden, and that reminded me of the story. And this story was told by the Bechukosai Rebbe. Now, another story connected to the Parsha, and I remember my father telling me this story when I was a child. The Parsha says, "V'nosati shalom aretz," I will place peace upon the land. And it goes on to, I read this in the Miyam Loyes, and the Miyam Loyes says that the greatness of peace is so much where even though you have all these blessings, If there's no peace, it doesn't matter, right? You can have all the good in the world, but if you don't have peace, you're robbed of the pleasure you're able to have. And there's a story about a woman who would go and listen to Rabbi Meir's shir on Friday night. Every Friday night, Rabbi Meir would give a shir, a Torah, and this woman would stay until the end. Now, one night, the shir went to the point where by the time she gets back, they didn't have timers or lights on. They had candles way back then. And the candle already had gone out. So he said, "Where were you?" He was upset, right? Where were you? So she said, "I went to the shir of Rabbi Meir." And he said that he swears that he doesn't allow her back into the house until she spits in Rabbi Meir's face. So she can't do that. And so for 3 weeks, she didn't enter her home. She stayed somewhere else, whatever it is. And after 3 weeks, her friends say, "Listen, you got to do something about this. Let's go to Rabbi Meir and let's ask him. Let's go to Beis Medrash. Let's ask him what we should do." So he says, so they go to the Beis Medrash. And Rabbi Meir already, when they come, he already knows in Ruach HaKodesh, by divine intuition, he already understands what happened. He knows what happens. And he pretended, he said, "I have an ailment in my eyes, and I need a healer." In Hebrew it's called loichashim, people who are like energy healers, so to speak, where they can say incantations or whatever it is. They have their ways of healing different ailments. And he said, "Is there anybody here who knows how to do this?" So her friends tell her, "Oh, now is your chance. Now, because very strangely, one of the things that these healers would do, it was common for them to do, was part of it would be to spit towards the person. And so she approaches, but she's out of respect and she had so much respect for Rabbi Meir, she couldn't bring herself to do it. And Rabbi Meir said, "It's okay. I want you to spit, toward my eyes 7 times, and you can go back to your husband and say, 'You told me to spit in his face once, and I did it 7 times.'" So, this is Rabbi Meir's way of creating peace between a husband and a wife again. Obviously, this guy was a little bit extreme, but the students of Rabbi Meir ask him, "Couldn't we have done that? Why, to have a woman walk into the Beit Medrash and spit in your eyes, that, someone from the outside's coming in doing it, and we're your students, we could have done it. We could have kept it, in the Beit Medrash. This isn't so much respect for the Torah." So he says, well, if Hashem, for Shalom Bayis, was willing that his name should be erased, and he's obviously talking about the Saita, where if a man suspects his wife of being unloyal, then you take Hashem's name, a parsha with Hashem's name, and you erase it in the ink into you mix the ink with water, and so you erase Hashem's name. And he's saying, so if Hashem is willing to erase his name and degrade, quote unquote, his name for Shalom Bayis, so how much more so I shouldn't be makbid, I shouldn't be worried about my honor, and it's okay. I thought that was a beautiful story. A strange story, but a beautiful story. Let's go on to the next thing. So the Rebbe asks a question. It says at one point in the Parsha that, and this is at the point where it's talking about the undesirable outcome if, God forbid, we don't follow Hashem's ways. And it says, "V'isvadu es chatasam," they'll confess their sins, which is the first step and the actual mitzvah of tshuva. But then it says afterwards, I'll bring them to the land of their enemies. So Rashi says that this is actually a good thing, that even though they're being taken to their enemy's land, it says, I'm going to bring them. In other words, that God is going to be with them even there. But the Rebbe's question is, if they are doing teshuvah, if they're doing vidui, right, they're confessing their sins, so then shouldn't they be brought back to their land? Why should they be brought to their enemy's land if they've done teshuvah? The whole point of them of why punishment happens is because of sins, but here they've come back. And the Rebbe's question is, why doesn't Rashi address this question? Rashi doesn't seem to be addressing this question. And the Rebbe explains that this must be a tshuva that isn't 100% sincere, isn't on the level that it should be. Because they're going through hard times, therefore they're doing tshuva, but it's not coming from a voluntary, from a place of love where they're coming back to God. It's almost like it's forced. And the proof for that is because it says that V'zacharti es brisi Yaakov, that right, es brisi Yitzchak, es brisi Avraham Esker. I don't know if that's the exact wording of the pasuk. I don't know, because it says it multiple times in Torah, but it says that Hashem is going to remember Yaakov, Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. And when a person's own merits of teshuvah are enough, he doesn't need the schus, he doesn't need the merit of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, however great they are. Only when a person doesn't have merits themselves, they need it. And so therefore, the proof is that since in this parsha, Hashem is saying that Hashem is going to remember them because of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, that shows that it's not the level of tshuva which comes from love of Hashem. Rather, it's because of hardship. And nevertheless, because at the end of the day, teshuva is tshuva, it doesn't matter why it's there. So therefore, it's a good thing, and therefore Hashem is going to be with us even in Galus. But this means that what? That the Geula is going to come through a tshuva that comes from love, a tshuva that comes from ourselves, comes from a real place, not because it's hard for me in Galus, not because I'm suffering, but because simply we want to return to Hashem. And obviously Am Yisrael is going through a really tough time right now. It's our generation who has to remember that it doesn't matter how good or bad life is. It's time to come back home, go back home in every sense of the word, and it's happening. It's happening. I don't think we've seen more love from so many people between us, ourselves, and so many people coming back to Torah. So I don't know who needs to hear this or why I'm saying this, but it's true, and this is what the Rebbe says. The Rebbe is telling us that Mashiach is going to come from us doing teshuvah at such a genuine level where it's just complete desire for connecting with Hashem and no ulterior motives. Now about the Haftarah. So the Haftarah talks about trusting in Hashem. And obviously, the theme of the Parsha is the good that comes through following Hashem and the negative that comes if God forbid, not. And in this Haftarah, there are psukim that are part of our everyday lives, are very part of fundamental Jewish practice every single day. Number one, a lot of when I was reading through the sefer that I use, the weekly Haftarah by the Midrash Says series, it mentioned a lot of stuff that reminded me of the Shara BITACHON. One of the things that it says is that the only one that's worthy of trust is Hashem, because the human being, even if he promises something, he can go back on his word. Hashem does not go back on his word. And also, even if a person is 100% genuine and really loves you and will go to the ends of the earth for you, at the end of the day he's limited, and no matter how good his intention, he doesn't have the power to carry out whatever he might want. He can try and he might fail. You can trust in a person's loyalty, but you can't trust him to get the job done without a doubt. The only one you can is Hashem, and that's something that is brought down very clearly in the Shara BITACHON. And I'm just bringing that down because I really highly recommend every single Jewish person to read Shara BITACHON. It's uplifting and at the same time challenging. It touches a part of us that we know is always there, and it brings it out, and it also challenges the part of us that's cynical and that's doubtful and that runs after material needs and kind of says, hey, give us a little reminder of what's important and who's in charge and who really has the power to give and take. So, there's so many things that are addressed I really recommend everybody. It's also to pick up that book, the weekly Haftarah, because it addresses so many things. Why seemingly good people have bad things to happen to them, and which is a big question. And I just wanted to bring some stuff that is brought here. One of the things it says is that someone who trusts in man is cursed, and he's like a arar, which is like a bush that has very little moisture and it doesn't yield fruits. And the person who trusts in Hashem is like a tree in water, right? It's like a tree in water that it always gives its fruit, and its leaves never wither. So, and the explanation is that even though you have someone who follows Hashem and yet he has a difficult life, so how does that make sense? How can you say that a person who follows Hashem, he always has his fruits and his leaves don't wither? What does that mean? And so the deeper explanation is that we don't always know the reasons for why good things happen to bad people and bad people have seemingly have good lives. There's a lot of answers to it, but what it's saying is that a person who trusts in Hashem, no matter what he goes through, he'll remain strong. No matter what he goes through, he'll be able to go through it because he knows that everything is from Hashem. And the Chafetz Chaim actually says a really, really good example that, when it comes to medicine, a lot of medicine is very bitter. And what they do in order for the person not to taste the bitterness is it's coated in something sweet, in sugar and flavor, so that it's literally sugar coated. And so, and Chafetz Chaim is saying that BITACHON, trust in Hashem, actually takes the bitter effect that hardships would have on a person and covers it in a sweetness, which is the kindness of Hashem, knowing that Hashem loves us and Hashem does everything for our good. And therefore, no matter how bitter it is, there's a coating over it, a protection over it of sweetness. And that's what you have when you have this awareness that Hashem is all good, no matter how hard it is to see that. And there's a known story of Reb Zusha where there were students of the Maggid who went to him and asked him, "We don't understand this Gemara." The Gemara says that just like you bless Hashem for the good, you have to bless Hashem for the bad. Now, to say you still have to bless Hashem for the bad makes sense, but to have the same elation, to have the same reaction to bad as you would to good, they didn't understand how it's possible. How can a human being get there? And he says, "Go to my student Zusha, and he will tell you." And after some traveling, they reach Reb Zusha's house, and they see that his house is decrepit. It's it looks like it's standing on its last few minutes before it's going to collapse, and his condition is so meager. He hardly has any furniture, and his kids are sick, and it was a really, really sorry state financially. And they come to him, and when he hears that they're sent to him from the Maggid, he obviously prepares himself, and they ask him this question, and he says, I don't understand why the Maggid sent you to me. Someone who had something bad happen to them in their life, someone with a difficult life, would be able to answer your question. But me, Hashem has only given me pure kindness and good. And at that moment, they understood that Reb Zusha had lived in a reality where no matter what happened to him, there was this positivity bias that no matter what, everything was good. And that's really what this Gemara means, is where not that you have bad happening to you and you still react to it as good. Rather, everything that comes your way, you could only view it as good because of the level you've reached in trust in Hashem. And now, obviously, we're not Reb Zusha, but definitely it gives us direction to go towards and something to aspire toward. I just wanted to mention that part of the Haftarah, and there's actually something really interesting. The Navi Yirmiyahu asks Hashem to heal him, and it says, Rifa'eni Hashem ve'erafei ha'ishi'eni ve'ivoshea ki sihila si'ata. Now, if those words are familiar, that's because those are the exact words that are used in the prayer, in the davening of Rifa'enu and Shemana Esrei, except that instead of it being singular, it's plural. So instead of Rifa'eni, it's Rifa'enu. Hoshi'eni, it's Hoshi'enu. Ne'rafe, not Erafe. Something really, really beautiful about that, and this is also something we absolutely should incorporate, and this is something I'm definitely going to incorporate in my daily prayer, at least when I'm paying attention, is this, that seemingly it's outwardly it's just Yirmiyahu asking Hashem to heal him, but there's a deeper meaning here, and it's saying that it says, heal me and I will be healed. And that's a very interesting way to say it, right? Normally you just ask to please heal me, please save me. Why heal me and I will be healed, save me and I will be saved? Why the double language? And the deeper answer is that this is a deeper recognition of Yirmiyahu, saying that I know that any ailment that I have physically comes from spiritual ailments, from spiritual defects, whether it's morally or in my connection to Hashem. And what it's saying is, Hashem, heal my spiritual ailments, and automatically my physical ailments will go away. And this is something which we know as Yidden, we know as Jewish people, that every physical thing has a spiritual source. And if a person is in the right place spiritually, they'll also be good physically. Like the saying that one of the Rabbeim said, a small hole in the body is a big hole in the neshama. We say this every single day. It would be silly to say, oh, someone who's sick, so then he's sick because he's living life like he's not living life the way he's supposed to. That's not our job. The ways of Hashem are not always that simple, as we just explained about BITACHON, that sometimes for whatever reason, things happen. This is something I'm for sure going to think about in the future, God willing, when I say those words, because those words come from this week's Haftarah portion. Now, last thing from Pirkei Avos. So in this week's Pirkei Avos, it says that there were 10 generations from Adam until Noach, to show just how much patience Hashem has. That even though from Adam until Noach, the generations in between, they were just doing things to cause Hashem's wrath, machisin uvain, right? They were sinning. Hashem waited until Noach, and he waited until then, until the world was destroyed through the Mabul. And then it says that Avraham, from Noach to Avraham, there were 10 generations to show how much patience Hashem has, because from Noach to Avraham, people were sinning and doing the wrong thing, and yet Hashem waited until Avraham, and then Avraham, it says, Kibel schar kulam, he got the reward of all of them. He received the reward for all those people. Now, what's the difference between Noach and Avraham? Why when it came to Noach, Hashem destroyed the world, but by Avraham, instead of destruction, not only was there not destruction, but Avraham took Avraham was able to get the schar from them. Now, obviously, we know that Hashem promised not to bring a Mabul that would destroy the whole world, but why was there, instead of any sort of punishment, Avraham getting a reward for all of them? And as we know, the difference between Noach and Avraham was that Noach didn't go out and try to change the world. He didn't try to make the world a better place. He lived his life. He lived a good, upright life. But he didn't try to change the world and make people better. And when people came to him, he told them what the message of Hashem was. But he didn't have any interest in people changing their ways and him influencing others for the better. Avraham Avinu, on the other hand, actually would travel, and he would call out Hashem's name, and he would bring many, many people back from idol worship and convince them that what they're doing is wrong and that they should serve Hashem. And that's why Avraham Avinu, he fixed the world. Noach didn't care about fixing the world. Avraham Avinu went around and he made the world a better place. He took evil and transformed it into good. And that's why he deserved reward because he actually went and interacted with the world and turned darkness into light. And the Rebbe says there's a lesson from here. And I love this. I love this so much because it's such a good lesson. We all have areas in our life, I know I do, where we're not doing what we're supposed to be doing. And thank God, there are times that we can look back on in life and say, oh my gosh, I was in not a good place, and now I'm in a better place. And the message here is that the way to work with it is like this. Anything which is so bad that it's not redeemable, any experience that you had, you're supposed to distance yourself from, obliterate it, just like the Mabul. You destroy it. But there are also parts where, just like Avraham did, you're actually able to elevate them. That the negative experience, the dark place where you might have been, can actually serve as a push and can actually be used in service of Hashem. And then not only is it not negative, but it becomes a positive thing. And it becomes a merit. So, for example, if a person looks back at a period of his life and looks, oh my gosh, I don't ever want to be there again, and he works harder in order to come close to Hashem. Or if he uses past experiences to connect with people who might be there and to bring them up. So then he's using an undesirable place, a dark place where he was in order to bring people to light, or in order to strengthen his service to Hashem. That's doing like what Avram did and transforming something which was not good into good. And then that turns into schar, that turns into reward, that turns into something which not only do we have to be ashamed of, something we can be proud of, and something that is considered light. That's it for this week, guys. I really enjoy doing these. I know that there's a long way to go. There's always ways to improve, but I'm super excited to be able to share something with you. And I don't want to just be talking to the camera. There's a lot of ideas that I have for projects. They take a lot of work, and I'm hoping to be able to bring at least some of them to the screen, not just be a talking head, although I'm going to continue doing this. But I know there's a lot that can be added to this channel, and I want to, and I will, God willing. I want you guys, number one, please, if you're watching this, comment, interact. I want to connect with you guys. I want to know what you guys like. Maybe give ideas of what you'd like to see, something that you think could work well. And welcome again to all the new subscribers. We're almost at 500. Super excited. And once we hit 500, we're going to want to hit 1,000. We're just going to go more and more and more. If you made it to the end, you're an absolute legend. Once again, this is dedicated to all the soldiers and hostages and all the Jewish people, and to peace in the entire world for Mashiach to come. Thank you for all the feedback, for all the love. Let's bring Mashiach. Good Shabbos.